Well, good morning and welcome to the Summit Church Online. I'm Brian Agovino, the lead pastor. It is great to be with you on this Sunday. We're in the middle of a study on the book of Habakkuk, looking at how engaging with God can help us in so many ways, where our path can be from sorrow to silence to song, and really digging into some great truths that we can learn from Habakkuk on that journey. I'm pretty sure the first time that I ever heard and or learned the phrase work smarter, not harder was back when I was in high school. I remember going on a mission trip in our church. I'm pretty sure I was junior, senior, about that time. We went to Kentucky. And we were serving in the rural areas of Kentucky and just helping out some farmers and different families in need and kind of some struggling communities. And so this one particular day, we had went to the this farm area. This family had all these hay bales that had been hay baled, so they were put in their squares, and our responsibility. The farmer took us out there in the back of his truck, and he had a big trailer, and he said, "Your responsibility is to put all the bales in the truck." And so it was this huge field, and so what we did was, there's probably 3 or 4 of us. For whatever reason, the farmer left, or he went somewhere. I don't know what happened, but he left. And so we're out there, and so we started. So we're right around the truck, and so we start gathering the hay bales, and we're putting them in the truck. And, we started to get further and further and further away, right, from the truck. And so at some point, after we'd been there for several hours, actually, I'm like walking 200 yards away to get a hay bale, and then picking that hay bale up and carrying it all the way, right, here, a 17-year-old kid, grabbing this heavy hay bale, walking it 200 yards to put in this trailer. And, we start doing, we'd been doing this for hours. Like, my legs were burning so much. And I will never forget this farmer coming up out of nowhere. I feel like he just watched this the whole time or something crazy. He comes up out of nowhere, and in this great Kentucky accent, which I'm not going to do for you, he said, "Guys, I left the keys in the truck so you could move it to where the hay was. It's always better to work smarter, not harder." And I just was like, what? So frustrated that we could have just been pulling this truck along. I'm pretty sure my legs still burning from working that day. Anyway, all that to say, that's the day that I learned this phrase, work smarter, not harder. The simple little truth that is can apply to so many things in life. I apply it to many things actually right now. I say it all the time. And one thing that you and I work so hard at is to be approved. Now, so much of our lives is about being approved and accepted. It starts when we're young, right? Just grades in school and performing well and doing good, being accepted for how we behave. Then, maybe it's college or our first job, getting accepted, putting out that application, being found worthy, finding someone to marry, being worthy for that, being successful. Like, we live in this world where there's this deep, deep, deep desire to be found accepted. But it's a sneaky thing, isn't it? Because we don't realize how hard we're working towards it unless we really step outside and look at it. There's a biblical word for what it means to be accepted, and it's the word righteous. We all have a longing to be righteous. It simply just means in and of itself to be right. I believe it's what's happening here in Habakkuk in some ways, if we can go back to our book. Last week, we saw that Habakkuk was frustrated with God. He saw all kinds of sins among his people, among the Israelites, and he complained to God because he thought, "God, where are you? Why aren't you doing anything?" And then God said, "I'm going to do something so tremendous and amazing that you won't believe it." And he says, "I'm going to send the Babylonians to discipline the Israelites." And Habakkuk says, "That's even worse." And he comes to God again with his complaint and his sorrow, and he says, "That's not okay. How can you use someone that's more evil than Israel to discipline your people. And Habakkuk is, it's interesting. You start to see him, and I want to be careful here, but you start to see him comparing everybody to everybody else. And God offers Habakkuk this radical answer to his second complaint. Let me read our passage together. This is God's answer. So again, we've seen this path here of Habakkuk complains, God responds by saying, here's what I'm going to do. And Habakkuk says, that's not okay. And then he says, but God, I'll listen. I'll wait for you to bring your answer. And here's what God says in chapter 2, verse 2 of the book of Habakkuk. The Lord answered me, write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so he may run who reads it. For still the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end. It will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. Behold, his soul is puffed up. It is not upright within him. But the righteous shall live by his faith. Now, it's a very pregnant and deep couple of verses here that we have in the book of Habakkuk. But basically, God comes to Habakkuk and he says, look, I'm going to do something and I need you to trust me. I need you to not think you have a better way, that you're better than the Babylonians. I need you to understand that what's about to come is what you need to trust in, that you've got to trust me. You see, if you think there's a better way, if you think you know what's best, if you think you're better than the Babylonians, well, here's what's dangerous about that. That's self-righteousness. That's exactly the opposite of what God asks from us in our journey with him. There's actually a way to live that will move, Habakkuk, your sorrow to song. But what God says is, I need you to understand this truth. The righteous will live by faith. That statement right there, that is our proposition, our smarter, not harder principle of the day. That instead of us striving for righteousness, striving to be accepted, striving to be found right, actually, the righteous, the way someone will be found righteous is through and by faith. And my proposition for you this morning is that the only path to righteousness, the righteousness we long for in this life, is faith. And this truth of Scripture, which actually is God's message all throughout, it really does change everything. So let's tease out two principles today. The first is this, the problem of self-righteousness. Why does God call out self-righteousness? That's the beginning of that fourth verse there where he says, hey, don't be proud. So let's talk about the problem of self-righteousness. And then just like last week we talked about the anatomy of a complaint, let's this week talk about the anatomy of faith. The anatomy of faith. So the problem of self-righteousness. God responds to Habakkuk and he says, there are two ways to live. The path of pride, where you think you know all the answers, where you have it all figured out, where you're puffed up, and the path of faith. Let's listen again to chapter 2, verse 4. He says, behold, his soul is puffed up. It is not upright within him. Let me read some different versions, a couple of different versions to help us understand what God's saying there. The NIV version of the Bible, it says, see, the enemy is puffed up. His desires are not upright. Or the New American Standard Version, it says, behold, as for the proud one, his soul is not right within him. And in essence, what God is saying here is he's saying to Habakkuk, he's saying, hang on. I hear your struggle, but let me coach you. Let me advise you how to live in the midst of this struggle. There are two ways to live. You can live in pride, where you can look down on your people, where you can think you're better than the Babylonians, and where you can think that I have no idea what I'm doing. Or you can be found righteous by putting your faith in me. So God says, beware, watch out for, don't be like the enemy, the proud. They're the ones who live, who justify themselves, who think that they're okay because of their own righteousness, their self-righteousness. And let's expose the problem of self-righteousness outright here at the beginning. The problem of self-righteousness is this. It's easy. It's easy to be self-righteous. It's so easy to find someone that I am better than. It's so easy to feel like I am acceptable when I compare myself to others. And the deeper I go down that path, and this is God's warning, the more it leads to thinking I'm better than God, or I know better than God, or I know what's best for me better than God. And we're going to talk more about pride and self-righteousness actually next week, because God shows them how his justice is going to be played out. But let's just press in a little bit today, because it'll help us understand the anatomy of faith a little better. So I want you to think of a public figure who's fallen recently. Maybe it's a politician, maybe a celebrity, maybe a sports figure. And do you know what we say as a culture when that happens? I mean, we are so quick in judgment. And what we'll do is we'll say, what a loser. Who would do something like that? What were they thinking? And then we start to say things like, come on, pull yourself together. And we have this thing in our minds where we're saying, you should not do that because you should be, and we don't say this out loud, but what we're really thinking is more like me, because I wouldn't do something like that. We're saying, pull yourself together like I have. And in essence, what we're doing is we're saying we're acceptable, or we make ourselves right. We justify ourselves. We find righteousness by comparing ourselves to others. We do it with random people on the street. We do it with people in the church. We do it with our best friends. And we do it with our spouses. I mean, what I'm saying the problem with self-righteousness is that self-righteousness is easy. And if you say, I don't do that, you're just saying you're better than the people who do that. See how easy it is? And God is saying, I will bring justice to the Babylonians. I will bring justice to the Israelites in my time, because I am righteous. But if you think you are better and no different than them, I want to invite you to take a different posture. A posture you need in this life to handle difficult times. A posture you need in this life to handle difficult sins. A posture you need to take in this life to handle difficult emotions. And what it is it's a righteousness that comes not from your own strength. It's a righteousness that can only come by faith in me. Bishop Handley Moulay stated, the harlot, the liar, the murderer are short of God's glory, but so are you. Perhaps they stand at the bottom of a mine, and you are on the crest of an Alp, but you are as little able to touch the stars as they. My friends, may we see the emptiness and the shallowness of self-righteousness, how the pursuit of it won't get us anywhere. It won't actually give us the acceptance, the perfect righteousness that we're longing for. That the pains of this life, the sins of this world, the depravity of humans will make it so easy for us to be self-righteous. But then we are just in need and do the justice of God as they are. God, however, allows for Habakkuk's sorrow to turn into something different. He accepts his sorrow and he listens to his frustrations, and then he offers to him a solution, a path, a way to live that could transform him and grow him and help him to be okay with the gravity of the scenarios that are happening. And the solution that God offers him is the righteous will live by faith. Let's talk about the anatomy of biblical faith, if we could. The second half of this verse, but the righteous shall live by faith. Faith is not, it's this beautiful thing that we have in Scripture. And actually this phrase, the righteous shall live by faith, is so significant that it's referred to in really the three most deeply profound and significant letters in the New Testament that talk about salvation. It's found in Romans 1:17, Galatians 3 verse 11, and in Hebrews 10:38. It's this fundamental truth that separates Christianity from the rest of the world. Everyone exhibits faith, but a Christian looks to only one place, faith in God, to find their righteousness. So do we know what it means to put our faith in God? Do we know what that looks like? I mean, it's actually kind of a frustrating sermon to do because I feel like it's a weird thing to talk about faith, that what I'm calling us all to is faith. Like, how do you talk about what faith is? Faith is a little bit of a nebulous thing, but I want to, from this passage, talk a little bit about what faith, how to put it into practice. Like, can we understand what it means to have a faith that will give us righteousness? So, two things this morning. The first is this: faith is trust in God's interests. It's an interesting way to think about this, but faith is not believing something hard enough. It's not wishing on a star. It made me think of the scene in the movie Elf near the end, spoiler alert, where everyone just believes, and because they're singing Christmas carols, it's like, oh, Santa's sleigh flies, and it's this great moment. No, faith is a trust in God and his character, and that what he's going to do, that the ultimate end that he has in mind is truly what is in our best interests. I mean, and that's a really hard thing to understand, right? But that's what faith is. When I act on my own, when I try to build my own righteousness, try to make myself accepted, I think I'm doing that because I think this is what's best for me. And what we see in this passage is Habakkuk's learning that the righteous, those who have righteousness, in God's eyes, they will have that because of their faith. And what he's saying is our faith in God is built upon this idea of who he is and who his character is, and deeply connected to this idea that he actually has our best interests at heart. So I have an autoimmune disease I was diagnosed about 10 years ago. And recently my doctor, fairly recently, maybe a year ago, told me that I needed to start swimming for exercise. And the main issue is my back. That's where the disease is, in my spine. And so I have to be careful, and I have back issues, blah, blah, blah. And so my doctor, was saying this. So she told me to do this about a year ago. Finally, I'm starting to think a little bit about swimming. And I was at lunch the other day here at the office with Jonathan, our worship minister, complaining about, I don't want to go to Y, it's too expensive, and it's too far to drive the extra, mile to get there a couple days a week, and yada, yada, yada. And so Jonathan, we knew that a couple of summers ago during COVID, we built in our backyard a above ground pool, and it's a circle pool. And so he's like, well, you've got a pool, why can't you just do it there? And Jonathan's like, what you could do is just swim in circles. Like, isn't there a pole you could put in the middle and tie yourself to it, and you could just swim in circles around the pool? And I was like, well, that'll just make me sick. But anyway, I was like, walked away from that. I was like, I wonder if there is something that could do that. So I actually got on the interwebs, and I found that there's something you can buy called a swim tether. And basically what it is this pole that stands on the side of the pool, and it connects to your waist, and it allows you to actually swim in place. So if you have a round pool, you can just swim in place. And so, but as I'm looking at it, I'm like, if I put this big old thing around my waist and on my hips, is that going to be okay for my back? So I'm surfing all through the website, I'm trying to figure it out, and well, there's nothing on there that says it is. In fact, it says it's safe. But for me, I'm wondering, is it really? I mean, even though Jonathan loves me, right? He doesn't have the credentials to tell me what I should do, right? He's like, couldn't this be a good idea? And then this company who wants to sell me this thing, they may have the credentials, but they definitely don't have my best interests at mind because they just want my money. So what did I do? Well, I went to my doctor and I asked her, And she told me actually it was a good idea. Thank you, Jonathan. Now, there's something I want to point out here about faith. You see, the reason why I have faith in my doctor is because of those two things. First, she has the credentials. She went to school. She knows about the disease I have. She knows about the body. She knows about how it works. She knows about how I have to be careful. She knows all those things. But I think what's most important about this is the second aspect of that. Because, I can believe that my doctor is a good doctor because of her credentials. But faith requires more than that. Faith is a trust, really a submission to, allowing her to speak into and trust her over what I think, because I believe that her credentials are also connected to her having what's at my best interests at heart. And I think that's a beautiful picture of what God is to us. That God is saying, listen, I have the credentials. I created you. I know all things. I know all that's going to happen in time. I've made promises. I've proven myself by sending my son Jesus. That there's a million and myriads of things we could talk about and look at that gives God the credibility to say these things. And I think the balance in that, and this is where we struggle, right, as Christians, is that with faith is also believing that God really does have our best interests at heart. And it's not just knowing that, it's trusting that. That's what an exercise of faith is. It's putting our faith in how God is above us, and that's what's happening here. In Habakkuk, he's saying, Habakkuk, I need you to be found righteous by putting your faith in me. Right? That your faith in me and trusting that I have your best interest at heart. I know what's going on. I know the right answer, no matter how sinful the world, no matter how dark things seem, that still you know that I know what's best. And that's one aspect of what it means to have faith. Biblical faith is taking God at his word and trusting that he has the credentials and our interests at heart. Well, the second aspect of faith that we can talk about this morning is that faith is trust in an external righteousness. So this is where the smarter, not harder part comes in. What God is saying to Habakkuk is that when you put your faith in me, I will give you a perfect righteousness. It will come from outside of you. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus, in the beginning of the sermon, he lays out these beatitudes, these descriptions of a Christian that will be true of them. And right in the middle, and I would say is the core of these beatitudes, he says in Matthew chapter 5, verse 6, he says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness." It's really interesting what he's saying here, because first he's saying it's not just some righteousness. The word there, righteousness, actually the way it is in the language is it's a perfect righteousness. It's a complete righteousness. It's an all-encompassing righteousness. So what Jesus is saying is he's saying, for those of you who hunger to be accepted, to be approved, to have God's acceptance letter written and given to you, that for those of you who want all of it, he's saying, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, they will be filled. It's a perfect righteousness that we can have it. And he's also saying that righteousness, it has to come outside of ourselves. It's something that we understand that we can't create ourselves. This is why God says that the righteous shall live by what? Shall live by faith. They're connected to one another, that it's our faith that are looking to something outside of ourselves is what is going to make us righteous. That's what God is telling Habakkuk. He's saying, in the midst of all this, trust me. Put your faith in me and me alone to make you accepted, to make you righteous. Martin Luther, the famous reformer, his faith journey really began because of this verse. The righteous shall live by faith. The phrase, the righteous shall live by faith, it doesn't mean faith will make them righteous, but rather they will be regarded as righteous. When we put our faith in God, we'll be regarded as righteous, counted as righteous, or even more significantly, declared as righteous. And Martin Luther said, you mean this is not talking about the righteousness by which God himself is righteous, but a righteousness that God gives freely by his grace to people who don't have enough righteousness or can't create righteousness on their own. Luther said, whoa. He actually says, whoa. You mean the righteousness by which I am saved is not mine? It's what he called justitia allentia. It means an alien righteousness. A righteousness belongs properly to somebody else. It's a righteousness that is extra nos, or outside of us. And Luther said, when I discovered that I was born again of the Holy Ghost, and the doors of paradise swung open and I walked through, and what's happening here is basically the point of what Jesus was saying, of what Luther figured out, and what Habakkuk declared, is that the righteous shall live by faith, that those who are put their faith in God, they will be given a righteousness, given something that is not of themselves. It will be outside of themselves, something so significant and beautiful, declared accepted and perfect and holy. It will be given to them through the power of God, namely in Jesus Christ, to make us before God righteous and all we need to feel accepted. You see, what God is telling Habakkuk and is telling us is, I know there is injustice and evil, but the path toward waiting, the path of sorrow to silence to song, it won't come because you are better than everyone else. The strength and power to endure and experience God during this time is for us to put our faith in him. And when we do, he will give us a righteousness. He will declare us righteous. Why? Because he is righteous, and he can do that. And ultimately, he can do that because of Christ. And so what I want you to see here is faith. There's these two aspects of faith that are incredibly important to us understanding and becoming righteous, to receiving the things that we want. It's if you will, come back to this metaphor of the smarter, not harder. It's what we try so hard to do. We work so hard to make ourselves feel righteous. We work so hard, and we'll carry that hell bell as far as we have to feel some sense of righteousness in our lives. And what God is saying is, if you'll just lay all that down, if you'll just stop trying to prove yourself, if you'll just stop trying to make it work for yourself, I have something for you. If you put your faith in me, if you look outside of yourselves for something righteous, if you'll put your faith in me, who has your best interest at heart, and faith in me, who is someone who can give you this righteousness, I will declare you righteous. If you're tired of trying to prove yourself, if you're comparing yourself to someone else so you can feel right, come and put your faith in a God who will grant you righteousness. It's just that faith in him, that he is good, that he is trustworthy, that he is righteous. And because he is righteous and perfect, he is the only one who has the right and the power and the authority and what we need to declare us righteous. When I was 18, I applied to a Bible school in Germany, and there was something powerful about receiving that simple acceptance letter. You're in. We want you. You're worthy. But in this life, because of all my hidden stuff, I could really never be worthy. I could never really reach the stars. But Jesus came, and he substituted himself for me and for you. And when we exercise the simplest of faith, we receive God's ultimate acceptance letter. Church, let me invite you in the midst of your sorrow to be silent before God and hear his invitation. The righteous shall live by faith. And what he is saying to you and to me is, trust me. Put your faith in me. I have your best interest at heart, and I will declare you righteous. Let's pray. Almighty God, we thank you this morning for Jesus, who, because of his work on the cross, we are allowed to receive his righteousness, the perfect life and the death that we deserved. And now we can stand before you, knowing that you accept us, not because we do things right, not because we're better than someone on the street, not because we're better than someone in our neighborhood, not because we're better than someone at our work, or because we're better than someone in our home, not because we're better than Israel, and not because we're better than Babylon. We're not. And we need a Savior to come give us a righteousness that's outside of ourselves. And so, Father, will you build our faith? Will you help us to have that seed of faith, to trust in you, to trust in your character and your goodness, and that you have our best interests in heart, and to trust in you, that you truly can accomplish this and give us the longing and deepest desires of our hearts. And may we today, Father, be filled and satisfied, and know without a shadow of a doubt that in you we have all that we'll ever need. And in that, then, we can endure the pains and struggles of this life until we're with you for eternity. And so we pray that all in Jesus' name. Amen and amen.